All right, we should be live. We should have video and audio. How's it going? Happy Sunday, everybody. Streaming day. Um, it's a crazy day today. So I'm going to be taking some pictures here as we start the stream. Um, of course, as things go on a day that I desperately need pictures to be coming out well, set up my backdrop, had all my lights, and for some reason everything was just getting completely washed out. I was having a really hard time getting any pictures to come out, so I'm finding the pictures are looking better just taking them here, sitting at my desk with a silly green towel as a backdrop. So give me a second here. But yeah, things are a little crazy because Atlantis Miniatures is going to Salute in 2 weeks. So Salute is a convention that's in England, and they're going to have a booth there selling their various miniatures, including their brand new line, which is these Dwarves. And he really wants to have as many of the painted versions there as possible. So I am first thing in the morning, I'm expedited shipping stuff to England. So that these can get there by Salute. So hey, if you're in England, if you're going to Salute, make sure to stop by the Atlantis Miniatures booth, check out these miniatures in person, say hi to Dan and everybody else who's part of Atlantis Miniatures there. Tell them I said hi, tell them where you saw these miniatures first. They'll appreciate hearing that. But yeah, so I'm madly trying to get as many of the models done for tomorrow morning as possible. And as you may or may not know, today is also Easter, which usually creates family obligations, and so there's a big family thing this afternoon that I also have to go to. So let me show you what I'm taking pictures of here. Hey, Mr. Heath. Hey, non-washable gamer. Glad to see you guys here today. So these are a couple of the miniatures I've gotten finished in the last couple weeks. Let's see if I can get the zoom on these. That's about as good as we're going to get, I think. So these are their brand new line coming out here in April. This is one of their female warriors. I put her on a red brick base to kind of match the red tones that she's got going on in the model itself. And the model that I'm finishing today is also going to have another one of these types of bases. I'm not going to do it red. I'm going to do a different color, so I'll actually show you guys how I do these bases. I know that was a question that was on Twitter, is how I achieve that stone look. So I'm going to actually show you guys today how I do that. This one I already showed you. This one, if you've seen some of my past streams. So I finished her a couple weeks ago. She was the first one I did. I actually took video of painting her from start to finish when Josh was in town, and so we're doing some tutorial videos with all the different effects on her. So any of the things that you're curious about how I did on her, you'll be able to see on video. This one might be my favorite. I thought that two-hammer dwarf that I just showed you was going to be the one I was most excited to paint, but I think this one, in terms of how it came out, I think she's my favorite. I just really love the colors. I love how the purple cloth came out with the diamond pattern on there. I really love the kind of purple and light blue tartan that I came up with for her. The head with the sides shaved. Yeah, I just think all in all she came out really nice. And then the base that she went on, this light birchwood base, was pretty fun to do too. So she came out really good. I like that. Hey, welcome. So it's your first time non-washable gamer. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope you go back and watch some of the previous episodes of things. I don't know how long Twitch keeps things for, but I've got a YouTube channel also. If you search for Gorilla with a Brush, eventually you can find my site, or you can always message me on Twitter or Facebook, something like that. I can send you the link. It has all my past episodes of streams, so if you want to go back and catch those. I've been working, she's over there, I'm not going to grab her, but on Allie, she's a 75 millimeter kind of Tomb Raider / Resident Evil type character. So I've been doing a lot of how to do her over the last few months. And so I have every single minute of the painting process for her. So if you're interested in that, go back and check that out. Thanks, the flocking. Yeah, the plaid is all freehand. Yeah, the plaid is all freehand. Everything on these is freehand. In fact, even this is 3D texture, these stones, but the wood base that I did for her, or the one I'll show you here in a second, that is actually all freehand. This is just a flat base that I painted that onto. So let's go. This guy, I'll show you him too. So this is the Brewmaster. So he was a ton of fun. In fact, I kind of got sidetracked. I was trying to finish, well, don't drop him. I was trying to finish a couple of the other models earlier, and I ended up starting on him, and he was just so much fun that I got totally sidetracked. Ended up finishing him first, but so yeah, he was fun. He's got another one of those bases, but instead of red, he's got like a warm stone color. Let's grab some pictures of this. So I saw, Mr. Heath, you asked any word on the videos for Josh. I don't know. I talked to him a couple days ago. He said he's been kind of slammed with work responsibilities, and so he hasn't had as much time as he was hoping to devote to getting those ready. So hopefully, sometime pretty soon, those videos should start to drop. You know, both he and I are just kind of doing them for fun. And so when that's the case, all of those real life responsibilities, all the things that make us money and put food on the table always have to come first. You can tell, obviously, I use a really, really nice, expensive camera to take all my model pictures. I'm just using my iPhone. Cameras on these things nowadays are pretty good. What else we got here? We also have like a dwarf maiden. She's serving beer to the hardy dwarf warriors. So yeah, this base is all hand painted too. So that's just a flat base, hand painted the wood texture on. So she's pretty fun, and I pictured her as the waitress at some touristy type bar, you know, flagon and dragon. So instead of dwarven runes, she's got the English common tongue because she's serving all of the races. But yeah. The interesting thing with her, probably just the fact she's not a warrior, the scale is a little interesting. She's definitely a petite dwarf compared to the others. The others aren't that large, but they're a little bit taller than a quarter. But she's definitely a tiny little thing. All right, this is the last one I got to take pictures of here, and then we'll get into what we're here for. I'll show you the scribe that I've been working on, and that I have to finish during this session. those 5 out of the way where I can't accidentally get paint all over them. Cool. Well, I'm really glad you're here, Non-Washable Gamer. And Mr. Heath, as always, welcome back. I really appreciate that you always make a big effort to come out and support my stream. It means a lot to me. Let's get this thing back into better focus here for painting. All right, so this is the guy I'm working on right now. Actually, I'll show him off a little bit up close. So he's the dwarf scribe. So yeah, if you want to talk about freehand, there's some freehand runes on the scroll. Give you a size comparison. But his was this dwarf, this pattern I did on the cloth was really fun too. I ended up glazing it with a color that has a little satin varnish to it. I'm going to knock all that off with Tester's dull coat later. It makes it a little harder to see on camera because of the glare, but there you go. And I just finished the book right before we got on stream here. I think the only thing left, I have to do a once over on him. I think the only thing left is his feather quill and then his base. I need to finish up for him. So about good. Hey, Mr. Heath. Thank you very much for stopping by. I totally understand. Today's is a holiday, so thanks for stopping by. Have a good week. Catch my stream next Sunday. I'm actually, my friend Gray is supposed to be on, and so we'll have a good time having a co-host again on that stream, so be sure to check out next Sunday. As far as how long I'm going, 3:30 to 4 my time, so it's 2:20 now, so at least another hour to an hour and a half depending on how long it takes me to finish things. So how long did that take to do? Yeah, the problem with the YouTube thing is I don't have a ton of subscribers on my YouTube channel, so like I'm way down on the search. Even when you search for gorilla with a brush, I'm like way down the page on the search results. So did you find me through Twitter, Facebook, or did you just like randomly find me? Cool. Oh, there you go. So Mr. Heath, if he sent you the link, so just do youtube.com and then follow the rest of that link he sent you. If you still can't find me, so if you're on Twitter, I don't know if you have a Twitter account, if you send me a message on Twitter too, if that link doesn't work for some reason, message me on Twitter and I'll send you the link when I get a chance later. All right, so I'm going to work on this quill. And the tricky thing with the quill is, traditionally the color is going to be pretty similar to the color of the scrolls that's there. And so I want it to stand out just a little bit. I don't want it to be exactly the same color as the scroll. So the scroll has a little bit more, it's kind of a brownish gray in a lot of the tones for it. So I might go a little grayer on the feather than I might otherwise. If you saw my picture that I posted on, I think I posted on Twitter a couple days ago about what my painting desk looks like right now, being in the middle of a project. I literally usually have 3 racks full of paints. They're all sorted and organized, and right now 2/3 of my paints are in a giant pile here. So I feel like when I was a kid and you used to play with Legos and you're looking for that one piece and you're going through your giant pile of Legos. It's kind of how I feel like at the moment. we'll try rainy gray to start. Yeah, YouTube search, even when you search the exact names for things, it wants to, I think, sort the results by popularity. It's like a big popularity contest. So, yeah, it's funny. Oh, I was also going to show these. These are sitting here too. So for those of you who aren't that familiar with Atlantis Miniatures' other models, this is one of their orcs that I painted up in the past, just to kind of give you a size comparison with their orcs and their dwarves. You know, so their orcs are definitely a beefy race. And I really like the design of this notion that the standard bearer, you know, it's not some big flag with symbols painted on it and things. He's just got a big flap of leather hanging from some wood, just something to be visible to other people on the battlefield. And this is one of their goblins. And the goblins are pretty comparable in size to the dwarfs, as you would more expect. These ones are 28 millimeter dwarfs. What I was referring to as 75 millimeters is the model from Black Veil Miniatures, or Black Veil Models. Her name's Allie. And I'll grab her for you. So this is the miniature I was talking about. So I just stuck her to her plinth, but I don't have the gap filled, and I don't have this thing primed yet, so I haven't been able to finish her. But yeah, I've been working on her exclusively on stream for the last couple months. So pretty much every minute, other than just a few little cleanup things I did off camera, every minute of painting her was done on stream, and they're backed up onto YouTube. So on my main YouTube channel, one of the horizontal rows that you can scroll down to is Allie. It's called something like Allie from start to finish, something like that. So you can watch I think there's about 10 videos. Well, 10 parts. Some of the videos are multiple parts because my stream crashed halfway through. But yeah, so it's about 20 hours worth of video on her. She took about 20 hours to get to this point. But yeah, she's the 75 millimeter model. All right, so I'm going to start. I'm worried that this is going to end up being lighter than I want ultimately. It's kind of funny, my giant pile of paints, I actually had more organized, if you could call a giant pile of paints organized. But then I had to move them when I was trying to take pictures earlier. Now let's actually do this. The tricky thing is it's also going to be right next to his beard, and I have to be careful not to match his beard color either. So I'm going to use Smoke Gray from the Scale 75 Warfront line as my base color. This particular guy, this scribe, I also agreed to do a written tutorial for Atlantis for this particular model. So I'm having to write down all the colors I use, and I'm going to have to every so often stop and take a work in progress picture so I can finish the tutorial later. Yes, I do use agitators, especially these. These are my favorite colors. These are my favorite paints, the Scale Color line by Scale 75. I've also got their Fantasy and Games line and their Warfront line. The Scale Color are by far my favorite, but they are really thick. So you should pretty much thin your paints no matter what brand you're working, except for maybe the Vallejo Air, the model Air ones if you're using those for brush painting, but pretty much every other type of paint, you want to water it down. And that's especially true for the scale 75 paints. And so they have to have an agitator, or else when you go to, no matter how much you shake them, if they don't have an agitator in them, you go to get the paint out and it's just going to come out all separated. So you'll end up getting this kind of clear snot stuff coming out where it doesn't have the pigment in it. It's just all the other stuff that's separated. While that coat's dry, I'm going to start working on the base. And let's, you know what, I'm actually just going to start by using the color I have mixed up here. So I'm going to make it really nice and thin. So very thin consistency. And then I take a brush that is not one of my best brushes. What I'm just going to do is, as I dip my paintbrush, tap it on a paper towel. I'm just going to dab along the cracks. But if you can see, kind of thicker, so it goes, about 1/3 of the way into each brick. It's okay if it goes more. Basically, I just want to leave a little bit of a light space in the middle of each brick. The idea being that this natural stone, if it's getting walked on, the center parts of the stone are going to tend to show the most wear. At least that's the idea that I'm going with. Let that dry. This base, the top of this base is a, it's like a cardboard material. It's by Death Ray Designs. So Death Ray Designs herringbone inserts. So this is actually, they have acrylic ones too, but this one's cardboard, which is nice because these are 30mm bases and none of these are 30mm size, at least in terms of for the top circumference. These are made for these round lip bases. And so for the 30mm size, they're smaller than 30mm because they have to go inside. And for the 40mm, they're slightly smaller than that. And I needed them to be basically 30mm. So I had to take one of these and cut them down. So that was nice. And then what I do is after I glue it to the top of the base, I put on a couple coats of thinned down Elmer's glue just to seal in the cardboard so it's a better painting surface, and then primed it. In terms of what it's attached to, This is just a piece of cork. It's from the Wrathcore holders. So the same holder I'm using for this guy. It's just the little cork inserts that hold the models. I'm just using it to make it easier to hold. All right, so back to this guy while that's drying. My problem is I really, really want to go to this color, rainy gray, but I used this in his beard. And I'm afraid if I start using the rainy gray, that it's just going to look like his beard. So I'm gonna have to start probably pushing the color more towards like a yellower off-white. So here we're using birch from Scale Color. Take a quick work in progress picture. So how long have you been gaming and painting non-washable? Let's see. I need to. It's too yellow. I like that. Well, welcome to the hobby. I'm glad that you're giving painting a go. Hopefully you're enjoying it so far. Are you struggling with anything in particular as you get started painting? Do you have any questions or anything? Hey Cass, what's up? I'm gonna take an opportunity here, and hopefully I don't knock everything over when I do this, but I wanted to show you this Cass can you see him? I've got a little painting buddy here with me. He's your biggest fan. He's hanging out with me while I paint today. Cool, yeah. The Star Wars Legion stuff is pretty cool looking, and obviously scratches that itch for a lot of people. I'm kind of surprised it's taken this long to really get a high quality miniatures Star Wars game on the table. I mean, I know X-Wing's been out for a while, Star Wars Armada, stuff like that, but an actual tabletop war game with vehicles and troops and all that stuff. I know there's a lot of people really excited about it. Hey, Dreadwall, what's up? My voice just cracked there like I was a teenager again. Yeah, I hold up the scale reference here. He's about the height of a quarter. So yeah, for those guys who showed up late, this is the sixth miniature that I'm doing for the new dwarf line for Atlantis Miniatures. And I'm desperately trying to finish him and his base during this painting session because I need to get them shipped tomorrow so that they can get to England by the time that there's a convention in 2 weeks that the owner wants to have these models on display at his booth to help him sell models. So yeah, he's been a lot of fun, but I gotta get him done. What do I wish I had known when I started painting? Well, let me think about that a little bit, and let me actually ask, because Cass is here. Cass just recently started painting. What's the most important starting lessons that you learned, Cass, during your first couple miniatures that you think are really important, or that you've learned from watching me so far? And while she thinks about that, I'm going to darken this color up that I just used on the beginning of this block. I'm going to use petroleum gray. What color was that? Smoke gray. Also, if you wonder, for those of you who showed up late, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, this particular model I'm painting, I had said I would do a written tutorial. So I need to take step-by-step pictures of everything I do. So yeah, Cass's advice there on thin layers is absolutely incredibly true. One of the, I think the biggest mistakes that beginning painters make is not thinning their paints enough. You know, the paints that you get that are coming out of straight out of the pot are generally just way too thick. They're going to leave brush strokes in your model. They're going to just be hard to control. They're going to dry thick, and so they'll obscure detail on your model, stuff like that. In terms of how many layers I do before I'm done, it depends a little bit on what I'm doing. So if you're just base coating something, so you're trying to get a nice solid coat down to start working off of, generally your paint should be, you'll know it's kind of the right consistency if it takes about 2 to 3 layers to get a solid coat. That's about what you're wanting for most of your painting applications. It's thin enough that it takes about 2 to 3 coats. Something like what I'm doing here, like I'm just trying to build up some darkness near the grout lines. So I'm just kind of putting it in there. You're not going to see that quite as much. And it depends on what you're working on too. The feather that I'm doing here is just such thin lines that I have my paint in a consistency where I'm just doing one coat for each layer. But for most of the stuff I'm doing, probably a couple coats for each color, and then there's multiple colors. So yeah, I think it's hard to explain a little. If you go back and watch some of my videos, you'll see what I mean. In terms of what she was saying also in terms of painting highlights. So when you're working with thin paints, when you're painting a highlight, so like his scroll here. So if I want the top of the scroll lighter, then if I'm working with a lighter paint color than what's my base is, and I'm going towards the highlights, you want to move your brush in the direction of the highlights, because your brush, especially as your paints are thinner, your brush pulls the pigments with it, and so it deposits more pigment at the end of the brush stroke. So you want that higher pigment concentration to be in the raised areas where you want the highlights to be. And then the opposite's true for shading. So if I'm doing the darker area here off of my base coat, so I have my darker color and I'm moving my brush in the direction of the shadows, so it's pulling those darker pigments down into the shadows. It's helping to create a nice gradation layer, but then also makes it darker in the shadows. So brushes towards, if it's a lighter color, brush towards the lighter places you want. If it's a darker color, brush goes in towards the darker areas as you're working. All right. Just in case I didn't grab that. Yes, in general, you want to find that sweet spot, and paint consistency, I think, is one of those. It's one of those things that just takes practice and it takes time to get a good feel for. One of the reasons people ask me a lot of times why I use these paint wells instead of wet palettes, because wet palettes are kind of what you'll often see really high quality miniature painters use. But I don't like wet palettes because I just find I can't control the consistency as well. And a lot of my painting is very, very dependent on the consistency of my paints. So I like these wells because I can have pinpoint control over how thin my paints are. And then, how do you know how thin to paint for stuff? I do have a video coming out on paint consistency. I can't promise when that's going to hit because my friend is sort of just pro bono doing the editing on the video. So it's whenever he gets a chance. But But yeah, paint consistency is just one of those things that it takes some time to develop and become aware of. And now it's all subconscious. I don't really pay much attention to it as I paint. I just sort of have a feel for what I want. And I almost just unconsciously mix exactly the consistency I need for different stuff. Only messing up, like 25% of the time and realizing I've got a little bit off on my consistency, but like for example, what I'm doing here, I've still thinned my paint off of what it is coming out of the bottle, but it's definitely not as thin as I normally paint with, just because I really want nice solid lines, and I don't want my paint to run down into the cracks of the feather, so I have to have that control. So the paint's got to be a little thicker than what I would do for layering and shading and things like that. Does your girlfriend paint miniatures, or does she paint like watercolors, or what's her? Are you asking me, Cass? I don't know if you are. This year actually, 2018, marks 20 years for me. So again, I'm just doing the same thing I was doing before, just kind of dabbing along the cracks. I'm trying to cover a little less of the stone each time, leave a little bit of those earlier layers. Part of the reason I'm dabbing here, or not part of, the reason I'm dabbing here instead of doing smooth brush strokes is because ultimately I want there to be texture. It helps to sell the final look of stone, to have things look rougher. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw the how long you've been painting for some reason, Cass. I thought you were asking me instead. I just got confused. Sorry, I'm a little brain addled here. Yeah, non-washable gamer was asking. Sorry about that. My attention is in 7 places at the moment. How are your classes going, Cass? I think when I mentioned this earlier, by the way, Mr. Heath was signing off. I was letting him know, but I don't think you were on the stream yet, that next Sunday, if all works out, my friend Gray, who was supposed to co-host one day with me, but then had an accident and couldn't come on. He's supposed to be back streaming, or he's supposed to come co-host with me next Sunday. So that'll be a fun conversation day if you're able to tune in next week. We can catch all the details of the story about how he got cold clocked by some guy in a parking lot, which is why he couldn't come last time. We'll also talk other things. He's done some miniature gaming with me in the past, but his big passion is Magic the Gathering. So he likes to talk about that. We'll probably have a little conversation around that and talk hobby stuff. I've got a couple questions from some people on Twitter. I was hoping to get around to being able to really spend some time answering them today, but I'm a little otherwise occupied. So I'm going to probably do those more next time. I'll try to collect some more questions over this coming week so that he and I can have a nice conversation and answer some of the questions that you guys have been burning. And if any of you who's on stream today, if you have anything you want me to show off next week, any specific technique or how to do certain colors or something like that, just let me know on Twitter. Or any of the other social media things, I'll put it on the calendar. Cool. Well, I think I managed to do what I was hoping, which was get the feather to look good and match with the model without it looking too much like the beard or too much like the scroll. So I didn't totally mess everything up, which is always good. And that should be the last bit of paint on this particular guy. So he just needs to be glued to his base and then have a thin coat of dull coat, and then he'll be off to join the rest of them. Yeah, the only thing I know from what he said about his stories, he was at some concert, and after the concert got out, he was walking back to his car, and some guy just walked up and punched him. He has no idea who the guy is. He has no idea what he did or what happened. So we'll see if there's more details to fill in. But that's all he told me when he was canceling. And then he sent me a picture of his busted lip. All right. So, a little bit more petroleum gray. Gray is also a really interesting guy. He's just one of these people he brings a smile to my face anytime I hang out with him. He's really high energy and gets really excited about things he's passionate about. So if we start asking him questions about things that he enjoys, he will be quite a treat to observe. I like him a lot. So yeah, so make sure you tune in next week. Oh, sorry, I gotta catch back up here. Printmaking has been super fun, and we finally got to go abstract painting in painting class, which is infinitely better than painting things. I can imagine. I'm sure it opens up a lot more creativity to be doing that. So yeah, he's great or fine. Yeah, this was a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago. He just sent me a picture that it was on a Saturday night that it happened. He was supposed to stream with me on Sunday. And I just woke up and he had sent me a picture, and his lip was just huge, swollen. And he basically said, "This is not how I want to appear on your stream for the first time. So can we reschedule?" I said, "Sure, man, what happened?" And he just said some guy just walked up to him in the parking lot and punched him. So we'll see. We'll get more details out of him. He'll tell the whole story, and I'm sure he'll be very animated about it, and it'll be a good story. Thanks, man. Freehand looks fantastic. I appreciate it. Cass, I appreciate it. Looks fantastic. Yeah, I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe this guy just mistook him for somebody else. But I don't know. We'll see. So this is just straight petroleum gray, which is the color I had been adding into the other color to make it darker. This is going to be the last of the darker layers I do. Well, kind of. There's one more thing I have to do. Oops, I didn't adjust the focus. Sorry, guys. If I leave it on autofocus, it'll just absolutely, it won't focus on anything. It'll want to focus like on my fingers or on the pattern here, and it will not focus on the model. So the last thing I'm going to do, I got to keep remembering to take pictures. Is I'm going to take straight black. Yeah, if you start asking him Magic the Gathering questions next week, that's fine with me, and he would love to talk about it. He's one of these, you know, Friday Night Magic every week, and you should ask him what his favorite card is, because he will love you to death if you come on next week and just ask him about his favorite card. So I invite you to do that. Hey Cass, I appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for coming in. Hopefully you can make it next week. All right, so what I'm going to do is I have some black paint here. I also have this brush that's kind of splayed out, a little bit fatter. And I'm going to get some black paint on this brush, and then I'm going to wipe pretty much all of it off on my paper towel over here. So essentially what you would do for dry brushing. And now I'm just going to dab. All right, I got too much off of it. Yeah, and I'm just dabbing the base. Yeah, I guess leave a little bit more on than what you would do for dry brushing. And the purpose of this is just more of the idea of texture. We want to sell this as stone, and stone has a lot of texture to it. So just go until you're happy. Doesn't have to be even everywhere. So we've got some texture into the base. Now I am going to take, let's go with, let's see, I want it to be slightly different than the other guy's base. And I had done that with a gray. So let's use I'm going to use Dubai Brown. It's one of my oft-used brown colors from scale 75. Oftentimes I like to add a touch of black to it. I'm not going to do that here, but. And I'm going to mix up a really, really thin glaze. So just keep adding water. So when you mix this up, so when I talk about glazes, I'm talking about having your paint at a consistency with where you touch the paper towel, it just instantly spreads out. It doesn't sit on top of the paper towel. It's one indicator you've got it thin enough. So dip my brush and then dab it on the paper towel to get most of it off. So this is not a wash, this is a glaze. The difference being is washes, you want to have enough on your brush and putting enough onto the miniature or the base or whatever that it will run. The idea being that it runs down into the crevices, it runs off of the highlight areas, and it creates some ready-made shadows for you and a little bit of grade between your highlight colors and your shadows. So that's not what this is. This is a glaze. The difference being is that glazes are intended to tint the colors that are below them, as well as help to blend layers together. So I want more control than I would normally do for a wash. Hey, Ghost Section, what's up? Oh, I was like, I don't know what you're referring to. I didn't see your color was blending in with the other colors on my screen. Cool brick base, I have a resin one over there I need to paint. Yours is raised and has some slightly different heights, which is cool, but it's tricky on the miniature. Yeah, this one's totally flat. It does have the crevices in there. It is a 3D. I was showing this earlier. It's Death Ray Designs does this. These herringbones. They have acrylic ones, but these ones are cardboard, which is nice because you can cut them down to size if they aren't quite the right. Aren't quite the right size or shape. So I'm just going to keep doing this. Until everything's kind of the color I want. And because this is made of paint, this glaze, even though it's very, very thin, the paint wants to cover everything that's there, dark and light. So it actually starts to tone down some of the darkest areas, brings them up, being a little lighter. And then it also takes the light colors and makes them a little darker, so it harmonizes everything nicely. So the more layers you put, the more the paint's trying to make everything on it this color. So you're just going to keep going until everything's a nice sort of balance between what you had there before and this tone I'm trying to add to the base. And hopefully, I think the colors are going to look nice on him. Yep, I agree. 2D can do the job just fine. I was showing this earlier. This is one of the models I just finished. And that's all hand-painted wood. So there's no 3D on that at all. That's just a flat base. But on this scale miniatures, a lot of times what will happen for this scale, anything that's done 3D on the bases, it's often hard to get the details to be in the right scale with the miniature. So if you got a 28mm model and you're actually, like if you have a wood base that actually has grooves cut into it, the width of those grooves is going to make the board look really unnaturally split relative to the scale of the model. I started going over the whole thing and I forgot that I don't want to do that. I want to keep the grout nice and dark, so as much as possible I want to keep this glaze just on the bricks itself. Hey, Mr. Heath, what's up? Thanks, Go Section. Hey, Go Section, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you can make it next week. I'll have a special guest on, so that'll be a fun stream next week. So we're almost done with this, but you can see that this this brick or stone look that I had done on these other models, and people were asking me how I did that. So you can see the technique here. This one's more of a gray. Yep, just did the same thing with different colors. I think I might go one more layer on this, call it good, get the scribe attached to the base. So I'll be able to send 6 of these 11 miniatures off to him so he can have them at Salute, and then I'll have to finish up the next 5 over this next month. And then in terms of after that, the next thing on my painting desk, I've got 2 things that I'll be working on. Well, 3 things that I'll be working on. Let's make it 4. Why not? So one of them is I got to finish Allie. I showed her on stream a little bit earlier. I need to do some gap filling on her base so I can then prime the plinth that I made, or that she's on, so I can finish her base and get her all finished up. So I need to finish that. I have a commission that Pact Team, you'll see him on my stream sometimes. He's been waiting really patiently for me to finish this dwarf commission, and I really appreciate that. But he's got me painting a Redemptor Dreadnought for 40K, and we're going to do some really cool freehand and filigree and stuff all over that model. So that one's going to be a lot of fun to paint. And then I have another commission that will be one of the limited edition privateer press models. They've started to doing kind of like a loot crate type thing where they have limited edition models they do every month, but you can only get them in that particular month's subscription service. So there's there's one of their limited edition models that has somebody who's kind of flying with flaming wings and then also flames below them. So that'll be a fun model. I get to do a lot of flame patterns on. And then the 4th thing is those busts that I've been showing off, the ones that I helped to manufacture. So I really need to start getting those paintings so I can start posting them in different places so people can see them and hopefully can help sell off the rest of the order. So those are limited to 90 each, and when they're gone, they're totally gone. So yeah, so those are my upcoming projects. Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a second Redemptor Dreadnought later. It's kind of funny how it worked out. every year I donate to the Nova Open Charitable Foundation charity raffle. And this year I was going to be doing a Redemptor Dreadnought, and I was wanting to do a Death Watch scheme. So Death Watch and then have Ultramarines as the chapter that's on his right shoulder, if you know anything about 40K. And Pack Team was kind of giving me a hard time that it's like, everybody does Ultramarines, you should do something different. And he's like, in fact, I'll pay you to do something different. Why don't you do this different scheme for me? So that's how I ended up basically going to be painting 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts. The one for charity isn't going to be finished till later this summer. It doesn't have to be turned in, I think, till June or July. All right, I'm going to wash my hands real fast because I'm going to be handling this painted model. The last thing I want to do after taking all that time to paint is to have some residue of paint on my hands or oils or something and get them onto the miniature. And I have to repaint him. So do I prime with an airbrush? So I do now. I only started doing that in the last year. So I spent 19 years priming with rattle cans. So you definitely can, but I prime with an airbrush now. However, if it's my cat is digging in plastic bags. If it's a metal model that's going to see play, then I'll actually still use a rattle can because I'll use automotive primer on that because it's self-etching. So it will actually physically bond to the metal. Whereas most primers don't truly bond to metal, and so they chip more. So the automotive primer is the most durable you can do if you're using metal models for play. But for plastic or resin, the airbrush stuff will bond to that just fine as long as you wash the plastic and wash the resin really well. You should wash the metal too, but wash those pieces before you, and let them fully dry before you try to prime them. All right, so when I attach miniatures to their bases, and I have these pegs, especially when there's multiple pegs like this, the trick to getting the holes in exactly the right spot is to get a little paint that will definitely show up on the base. Dip those pegs in the paint. Figure out how you want to orient the model. And then you get 2 nice little marks showing exactly where to put your holes. It's just paper clip. It's the small thin paper clip. It's the perfect size for these drill bits that I have. I'd have to look up exactly what size drill bits they are, and this is a pin vise. This is one of the coolest tools for modeling. If you don't have one, I highly suggest you get one. Just a little hand drill. So you're not using a power drill while doing delicate work like this, in which case you are more likely to put a drill bit right through your hand. I'm just widening the holes. These are going to be completely unseen, these holes, but the way that those pegs are attached and then primed and glued, there's some buildup of glue and primer right at the base of the pegs, which can prevent the model from sitting flush on the base if I don't essentially kind of create a little wiggle room. Do a quick dry fit. Boom. A little bit of glue. My favorite is Zap-A-Gap. And the final step will be to paint the black around the edge of his base. So I'm going to put him back on this thing. For the bases, I like to use the GW black, Citadel Paints black, only because it's a little more durable than a lot of the other blacks. And since this is the base, this is where people are going to be handling it. All right, let me catch up here. Yeah, absolutely. If you try to drill, use a big power drill to do, or for pinning, just trying to attach thin little arms and joints on. So I do own the accelerant that will work with Zap-A-Gap. I generally try to avoid it as much as possible. The reason being is that the accelerant creates it creates kind of an unnatural curing process. So because it dries so quickly, it dries extra brittle. So while you're creating a bond faster, the bond is not as durable over time. And so I prefer to avoid it if possible. Now there are certain times when that's not really possible. There are certain pieces that just don't want to stay together and are very hard to hold or very hard to hold without gluing your finger to the model. And in those cases, I will go ahead and use the accelerant, but in general, I try to avoid it. The other thing that can happen if you're using accelerant is it's kind of nice if you have a little bit of time to play with the connection as soon as you make it. Sometimes the piece isn't exactly in the right spot when you first touch it to the model. So having that extra couple seconds to slide it around and get it into perfect place can be nice. That'll take a little bit of time to dry. I've got to do at least 2 coats on that. All right, catch up here on stream. Let's see. I think you're Mr. Heath saying, does it interact with the paint in an odd way sometimes too with it? I'm not sure. You definitely, if you spray accelerant on the model, you want to wash afterwards because it'll leave a little bit of residue. I would definitely recommend that. The other thing too is because when it dries, and it'll dry really quick and brittle, as the paint or as the glue cures, it tends to sort of shrink into the joint that you're gluing. And the zip kicker stuff will just instantly like cure the glue exactly where it's at. And so you can end up with these sort of joints where all the glue has got a weird texture to it all around the joint, and it didn't kind of level as it dried. So you can get that a little bit too. Is there a reason I use pins? Yeah, so the way these holders are designed to work, which by the way, I love these holders. You see a lot of other people will have pill bottles or something where they hold them like this and do the miniature. But for a lot of the fine detail work that I do, like the freehand stuff, I need more contact points on the model so I can rest my hand on my own hands or rest my hand on the model. And that's what these are designed to do, is to make it comfortable for you to have contact points closer to the various parts of the model without actually having to touch the model. So these, I can't even imagine painting without these now that I have them. But the way they're designed is that they have these split corks. So they'll grip, and then you pop them in, and as you push them down, it then pushes this together, which holds your model in place. So these will work great if you have tabs on the bottom of the models. So if the models have tabs on their feet. The problem is that with the tabs, if you want to attach the model to a base later, if you've done the tab on this but not into the base, you can't have like a base painted and then just put the model on. You have to wait and do all the basing until after you do the painted model onto the base, in which case now you've got glue going onto painted models, you've got all sorts of other stuff that can happen. So I prefer to kind of do the base separate and the model separate and then put them together. So I don't want the big fat tab sitting on the bottom. And some models don't have the tabs, in which case you can't really get them to stick here. You can put blue tack, which is fine for lighter models, like these resin models would be fine for that. But I just prefer the security of having the pins in the feet. And then I just clip them into this. It holds them really well. And then later I have a pin already into the model that'll help hold it into the base. So that's why I do that. Yeah, it's definitely the brush control thing it's another one of those things that takes time. What I suggest to people who are always talking about, like, they're jealous of my freehand or whatever, just practice. So obviously it's getting a good brush is important, but take something and just practice, like writing the alphabet, writing cursive, writing print, just practice using a brush. Mess with different consistencies of paint so you can get a really good feel for what's my paint consistency going to be like that I need to do that kind of detail work, and then the fine brush control. But yeah, these holders are great. They're really, I can't remember the shipping. The shipping might be a little expensive from Europe, but they come from Germany. Sorry. But I mean, they're like $20, which isn't cheap, but it's also not super expensive for just how useful they are. They come in 3 sizes. So this is the small size. This is great for Space Marines and smaller. They have one that's a little bit larger than that, so it's maybe like this tall. So that's great for slightly larger models. Then they have one for the 75 millimeter model, which is really good for 75 millimeter models. But I will say that it's the least comfortable to hold, especially if you have smaller hands. I have really big hands, and it's still just right at the right at the limit of what is comfortable for me to hold as I paint. So you can look on their website and get the actual measurements and see what kind of models you paint most of all, and make sure you get a size that's good. I would always recommend getting one where this head, this contact point, is as close as possible to the top of your model. Just because the further this is above the top of your model, you start to lose that idea of having the contact points really close to the model. It's better to be holding as close to the top of the model as possible. Yeah, the one I was using with Allie is the 75 millimeter size one. And so, yeah, I mean, she's that tall, and you can't really see that. She's like, well, anyway, you saw her. She's tall. So I think it's 90 or 120 millimeters or something, the distance between. So it's a pretty tall holder. Comes in handy when you have those bigger models, but it's definitely not as comfortable. But yeah, $20 for a tool that is essentially indispensable. Not too shabby. All right, is this guy ready? Not quite. Hey, Odin Dark Soul, what's up? I really like your stream. I appreciate that. I hope that it helps people. I hope it inspires people to do better, to try new things. So I really appreciate that. Would I suggest a dry or wet palette for beginners? That is a really excellent question. And my suggestion is to try both, actually. So the reason that wet palettes would be good for beginners is that wet palettes will help with the problem that most new painters have, which is not watering their paints down. So if you try to paint with something straight out of the bottle, it's not going to give you the effects you're looking for. You really have to be more patient, thin your paints down, do a couple thin coats to get the effects that are going to look really good and that you're going to be really happy with. And for that reason, the wet palettes will help because they will help thin your paints. My problem with wet palettes is always that flow of water you can't really stop it. I mean, the paint's just going to want to keep absorbing water from below it. And so over time, I find that the paint that's in my wet palette just keeps getting thinner and thinner. And a lot of my paint techniques rely on carefully controlling the consistency of my paints. And so I have a really, really hard time with wet palettes. So I prefer these wells where I just drop a little paint in, add water until it's the exact consistency that I want, and then work there. And then if I need it thinner, just keep adding more water. If I need it thicker, I can add a little bit more paint, or I can just start in another well. So I like this for more precise control of your paint consistency. And so obviously in terms of, if you want to know what I recommend wells because I don't use wet palettes. But just don't forget that you need to water your paints down. And so make sure to thin them. So you put the paint in there, but then add water. But I also do seriously recommend trying a wet palette. There are people who say that wet palettes changed the way they painted forever and they instantly saw better results as soon as they started using a wet palette. So, yeah, I mean, there you go. That's the best I can do. These are really cheap too. These are $1 at a craft store. Wet palettes are also pretty cheap to create because really all you need is a Tupperware container, some paper towel, and some baking sheets, baking paper, parchment paper. So they're also cheap. So you can do both of them for a couple bucks and just see what you like. Definitely search some YouTube videos for how to make the wet palettes. I wouldn't suggest going out and buying a super fancy wet palette, especially if you don't know that it's something that you're going to use a lot and something that works with what you're doing. I love the parts of my stream that are just watching paint dry. That's the, that's the most enjoyable part, right? Needs another couple minutes. Yep. Again, that's what I find, but it's you know, painting. The funny thing about painting is it's just such an individual process. You know, each one of us, we take all these little tips that we learn from other people, from what we see other people do, from what we try, and we end up creating this style and technique that is entirely 100% our own. And so that's really cool, but it's also sometimes difficult to give, you know, specific advice to people because even if you're trying to mimic exactly what I do on stream or in some tutorial, you know, just, you know, even if the brand of paint's a little different, if your water consistency is a little different, the paintbrushes you have is a little different. It all goes into just who you are as a painter. So, yeah, it's just about practice. It's about trying things, but yeah. But again, I think the wells are fine. You just have to do two things with the wells. One is you have to remember that you need to add water. And the other thing is you have to stir every so often. Because in the wells, the paint is going to want to separate. The pigment is heavier than the liquid binders and things that they have in there as well, usually. And then if you add water as well, the water is going to kind of float to the top. So, like, I don't know if you can see, I have some of this in my... So this was a glaze I had been using on that base earlier. And again, it might be kind of hard to see, but the top surface of this is mostly water. And if I start to mix it, again, I don't know how well it's showing up on stream, but you should see that it got darker because the pigments were starting to sink down to the bottom and it was separating. So you just have to give it a good stir every so often. Make sure that you're not getting paint separation. All right, that ought to do it for this guy. Just once his base is fully dry, I will be able to spray a coated dull coat on him and then get the final pictures taken. So I know I've said it before, but these Atlantis miniatures models are so cool. Like the detail level on them is really, really good. But in addition, like this guy's one piece. Like he doesn't require any assembly at all. And in fact, of those dwarves that I showed you, I'm pretty sure most most of them were one piece. Yeah, very few of them required any assembly at all, which is really nice. To maintain that high level of detail while also minimizing the number of components. Makes them good for painters and for gamers, which is really cool. Thanks. They are resin. The Atlantis miniature stuff is all resin. But like if you see that giant Etten model that I had painted before, he was only 4 pieces. So his upper torso, his legs, and then his 2 forearms. He was only 4 pieces. The big blue troll I painted, I want to say he was maybe only 3 pieces, maybe 4 pieces. But yeah, so they made their, this guy was 1 piece, if I remember correctly. I don't think there's any joints on him. This goblin was 2 pieces. He was just the goblin itself and then the arms and hammer were a 2nd piece. Like right here at the leather spots. She was 2 pieces. The shield, like her lower forearm and shield, is a separate piece, but everything else is just 1 piece on her. This dwarf brewmaster might be 2 pieces. But yeah. So right now, I don't play any games at the moment, really. I used to play Warhammer 40K, I used to play War Machine, Warhammer Fantasy, Malifaux. So I've played a lot of games. At the moment, I don't play anything. I've tried Guild Ball. And so as of right now, I only paint stuff just for fun. So that's my thing at the moment. So I do some commission. I do stuff just for myself and then sell it if somebody wants it. I do play some D&D from time to time. I haven't had a group for the last 6 or 8 months, I think. But you know, when I do D&D, I'll paint up characters for myself and sometimes for the rest of my party. Or if I'm the GM, I'll paint them up for my players if they don't want to do it themselves. But it's kind of fun. It was really nice to switch to painting stuff that wasn't for a game. I'd spent most of the last 5 years, well, go back to 2017, since the beginning of 2017, the 5 years prior to that, been basically just painting my Trollbloods army. And so just a lot of the same paint scheme over and over and over again. And so it was really, really cool to just say, you know, sell off that army and not have any other games and basically just paint anything I wanted to. And I think I really took a big jump in my skill level and the quality of my output, I think, once that happened. And I've noticed that in the past too. It's almost like each time I would quit a game and sell that army off and then have a period of time where I wasn't playing anything, I would see a big jump in my painting ability because I was trying new things, trying new techniques, trying new paints, as opposed to just trying to replicate what I had done before. And so it's always a period of creativity and growth for me whenever that happens. So I've been really enjoying the last year just doing that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know any other games that are on the horizon that I'm looking forward to. So I don't know. We'll see. My buddy's trying to get me into Guild Ball. I've tried it. I had a team for a little while. I didn't actually ever play with them other than to do the demo games, but we'll see. Yeah, it definitely turns into a bit of an assembly line. Even with painting the same color scheme, I could still only paint about 5 models at the same time. I would just go completely nuts trying to do each color on more than that, because I would still try to paint them to a really, really high quality. I was always of the opinion that I wanted my army to showcase some of the best models that I could do. I didn't want it to be, if people came up and saw my army and complimented me on it and said, "Oh, that's fantastic paintwork," I never wanted to have to say, "Well, this is good, but you should see my real stuff." I wanted my best stuff to be my army. And so I always took really a lot of time. In fact, I kind of joke about this, even though it's true. It's not a joke. I didn't have two fully painted lists that I could truly field, two fully painted lists for War Machine until about 6 months before I quit the game, having two like 75-point lists. I had probably 200 points painted by the time I quit, but in terms of having the models I needed for tournament lists and stuff to go fully painted, that didn't happen so it took about almost 5 years to get to that point. Yeah, you can check out my Troll Bloods. I have some of them on my Gorilla with a Brush website. If you go there and go into the gallery, you can see my Troll Bloods army. See what those guys look like. All right, well, this guy's almost dry. I need to take him outside and spray him once that base finishes drying, snap some quick pictures, and then head over to my in-laws' house. So I'm going to sign off for today. I really appreciate you guys stopping by. Please, if you can, come next Sunday, same time as usual, so 2 o'clock my time, which is West Coast time, so 5 o'clock Eastern time. My friend Gray will be on, which will be really fun. I'm going to post more calls for questions on social media stuff in this next week, so things you want us to chat about, any paint techniques. I know that somebody already asked about painting white, and I didn't get really a chance to talk about that today, so I will talk about painting white next week. He or she asked me a second question as well. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I'll go back and find it. And then if you have any questions or anything you want me to either discuss, or if it's something I can show, you can ask me next week, or you can send me a message on social media or send me an email, something like that, and I will add it to the list and we'll chat about it next week. But anyway, thanks again for showing up. Thanks, Odin Dark Soul. Thanks, Mr. Heath, Non-Washable Gamer, Cass. Did I miss anybody? Dreadroll. Yeah, thanks everybody who showed up. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week, okay?